Okay, hi, I'm Brittnee Bond, and this is Remote Collective, and this is Benjamin Ellis. Thank you so much for letting me have you on the channel. I got connected with you about remote work, all the stuff that you're doing, and I wanted to share with people some success stories that you guys have had working with teams, because I know you do culture change within organizations, so remote work is not like your major thing. I think that was like the first thing you said to me when we got on the phone. You were like, we do a lot of other things. And I was like, okay, it's fine. But I want to know about the remote work stuff. Yeah. So maybe just fill people in about anything related to remote work.
Sure. There's two angles for us. So first of all, our business itself is remote. So it's kind of rare that the team are in the same place at the same time. It does happen sometimes, but it's the exception rather than the rule.
And tell people what your company is.
So my company's SocialOptic. So social, so people kind of interactions, attitudes, optic, visible, transparent measurement. So we really help people understand what the culture of a business is and kind of where the barriers are to productivity and engagement. And that ranges everything from kind of experiences for patients in hospitals through to traditional workers through to some wild and interesting workplaces.
So to give people context, who's the people that normally hire you? Is it government linked or is it private companies?
Yeah, so it's a range. So we certainly have governments, particularly where people are looking at services, so whether it's education or healthcare, organisations where people are high value assets. Where the people are really the things that make a difference to the business. So if you think about something like pharmaceuticals, those people and their kind of sparks of creativity are where the intellectual property and money comes from. So they're really kind of high value assets. So a lot more caring than that implies, but it is, you look at the business like the people are the most important thing. And that tends to be where we work predominantly, where actually, if you look at what the business is looking after from an MBA point of view, actually the people are the most valuable thing the business has got, and creating the right environment for them is critically important.
That sounds amazing. Wait, hold on. I'm going to frame. Can we just do a little behind the scenes moment that it took us 10 minutes for me to decide this was an okay shot?
And now this is the right way up and everything, and it hasn't fallen over. And
it fell over like 5 times. Okay. So what would you like to tell people, or just, I want to know what you think about people working remotely.
Yeah. So
you're like,
yeah. It's fascinating because a lot of people kind of look at remote work and they're nervous, and you start to look at the things that they're nervous about, and most of them come down to basically creating the right environment for people and managing people effectively. And actually, when you look at the things that you need to do in working with a remote workforce, they're actually kind of basic good practice. I mean, if you do those things and they're part of your culture, they help everybody, not just the remote workers. So one of the things for us that we've really been learning as a business, which is kind of an obvious thing, but it takes a while, is interacting first as human beings. So if you're starting a conversation with somebody, take a moment to understand the context they're in. Where are they? How are they feeling? What's just happened? Where are they going? What are they concerned about? Doesn't take long to do that. If you do that and set that context for your communication, it's much more effective communication. Everyone's happier. You have to do that for remote folks, particularly because you don't know what has just happened to them where they are. In an office, you kind of know, they've been sat at that desk for the last 3 hours. I kind of know what's gone off for them. I saw the boss come over and have a go, etc., etc. But actually, doing that same thing in an office environment is still just as beneficial. How are you doing? What's happening? What are you concerned about right now? That basic kind of scene setting stuff works everywhere. But particularly for remote, you have to make that a real discipline, because it's really easy to kind of hit the button, fire up a call, and I've done it myself a million times. You dive into the conversation without realising, actually, they're worried about the kid kind of barging in, and the dog's just done who knows what. And so actually just being relaxed about those things enables people to be themselves and engage. And actually, certainly for anything that's knowledge-based work, that's really important. Our brain doesn't fall into different bits, as I'm in work mode now. So that more rounded approach that you have to do for remote work benefits everything, and just making that part of the culture. And again, it's not just doing that just for those folks. Actually, it's like, this is something we can do company-wide, and everyone gets to benefit from that.
That's cool. How many people do you have in your team? So
we kind of flex team size. So it's usually around about a dozen. And in terms of the contact between those, we can go long periods of time where there isn't really a lot of contact between us, because we're tending to be working quite autonomously. Our design is that we have some things where we will kind of pair or group on things, and that will kind of form different little stars, but mostly we're kind of autonomous and doing our thing. And that's a purposeful work design, because for us, it's how do you create a work environment that fits around the other demands that people have? Because for us, we look for really talented individuals who a traditional workplace structure would be difficult for them. And that's kind of more generally
why do you do that?
Why do we do that?
I think it's cool, but I just want to know why.
There's a whole range of things. One is that we tend to I mean, we're an interesting bunch. We tend to go for kind of fairly neurodiverse folks, and that means sometimes people kind of need space, etc. I've got 4 kids, and
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so you kind of learn those are kind of important, and fitting work around 4 kids is its own level of special. So having done that, for me, it's like, well, we can do that for other people. And what we get out of that is we get really, really good people who we know are going to stay with us and who value the environment that we've got. So everyone in the business cares very passionately about what we're doing and cares about each other as well. And for me, that's the workplace that I wanted to build, having done all sorts of different ones. So for us, that's our design, our trade-off, as it were. Other people will have different ones. So
just to recap, what you were saying is it's really important to make sure we do human check-ins, especially if we're remote. And I know what that feels like, because when I'm on like the phone or the laptop or whatever, my brain is like, okay, business mode. I've even had long distance relationships where I go into business mode on our catch-ups, like in a romantic setting, because I'm so used to just being like, okay, on the computer is work mode. Like if I'm in person with you, we're hanging out. And I think that that's good in life in general, to just be like, let's just check in.
And behaviours, if you look at how people behave, I mean, watching a lot of what we've looked at is how digital tools are used in the workplace, for example. And I love technology. I think it's amazing. I've kind of been involved in all sorts of things of kind of designing kind of early voice over IP systems. I think it's fantastic. However, there is a kind of accidental thing where we can forget that we're dealing with a human at the other end. It's like it's a picture on the screen. And whether you look at kind of research around gaming or any of these things, it's very easy to fall into that's kind of an asset at the other end of the screen as opposed to, oh, it's a person.
Yeah.
And so again, if you're interacting digitally, you kind of have to make that part of the culture. Okay, recenter, this is a person, they have emotions, they have feelings, they're watching what I'm doing. We can kind of pretend machine, but we're not. And again, particularly for kind of low bandwidth communications, as we call them, like particularly just text based, you really have to make sure you recenter every so often, because you just kind of forget and things get heated, and sometimes you have to reset. It's like stop, get a high bandwidth connection up, get a video connection up, talk about something else, reconnect, and then go back to the problem. Because particularly if you're solving, a lot of the problems we solve are incredibly high stress. They're things that matter. If we make a mistake, it has quite serious consequences. And so in dealing with that high stress environment, you have to kind of create safety valves, because you're trying to solve the problem. Everyone wants to solve the problem, and everyone gets kind of, and sometimes actually you just kind of need to step away. And again, one of the things about more cyclical remote work, where it's part of a pattern, is actually being able to say, we're going to do these intense things in the office on these 3 days, and the other 2 days you're going to go and do
like chill things.
Still important stuff, but chill things that are less kind of human interaction.
Less emotionally like taxing.
Let the introverts recharge.
Yes, I've learned that. I'm very extroverted, but I've made room for everyone on my team. And I think that's really hard to do as an extrovert. Like I have to tell myself that I am supporting them by leaving them alone so that they can recharge. But you guys did a report, or you did some research on remote work or something. Yeah. Can you tell us more about that? Yeah,
so there is this thing that, remote work's this kind of new thing and it kind of came with the technology. It's not. And so we went to look at some of the very traditional, what are called remote workers, those people who are not based at their desks. And there's lots of them. It's a huge chunk of the economy. You think about bus drivers, you think about train drivers, you think about emergency services staff. These are not folks who are at a desk. They're not at one fixed location. They're in different places all the time. They are remote workers. That's not a new thing. And so it was kind of fascinating to look at how that workplace design worked and what that teaches for kind of more quote-unquote modern remote working, technology-enabled remote working. And it's many of the same things, understanding how the relationship works with the person who's managing or leading them. It's really important, regardless of the context, and how you shape that into the design, how they interact with their team members. And again, we use that word team very loosely sometimes. Like a group of people with the same job function are not a team. They're a group of people with the same job function.
Yeah.
And they might kind of form a team, but the reality is their actual team, and again, kind of with digital, it's much easier to see, well, actually, who are people spending their time interacting with. The kind of home team that they work with can be quite different. And again, that has impact on how you design and build in that interaction time and who they're building relationships with and who they're level setting with as well.
So would you have any recommendations? I'm just going to move the camera. I'm being a little bit FCD.
I also have a sneaky sip of my tea.
Yeah, you do that. Okay, so do you have any tips for anyone? This is like, remote collective channel. I'm always trying to get people to work remotely more, but I also realize there's real thing. The more I get involved in it and work with corporates especially, the more I realize it's very complicated, very intricate. So do you have any tips or success stories of anyone, your team included, being able to work remotely?
So tips and success stories. So I think, the tips are a lot of the things that you might initially be concerned about. How to kind of manage people, how do we oversee things? All of those things are problems you've got to solve anyway, right? How you're doing performance management, all those traditional things, you've got to solve that anyway. It doesn't change it. The fact that they're at a distance just means it forces the issue of solving it. So kind of park those things, solve them as you would do normally. Culture is really important because people behave in accordance with the culture that they believe is in operation in the business. That's a bit of a mouthful, but so
they follow whatever culture you set.
Yeah, okay. And if your culture isn't accepting of that, then you're setting yourself up to make that difficult. Or conversely, what you need to do is express in your culture, we're doing this thing, we're going to talk about doing this thing, we know we're going to have to learn and change, let's talk about how we learn and change. And that's an opportunity to talk about your culture and improve your culture anyway. So do the culture thing, talk about it, make it more explicit. Understand the people. So one of the things that we've learned over the years in working with different organisations is, one, obviously different people are different. It's blindingly obvious, but people kind of forget that, right? Yeah. And teaching people those skills of understanding that is even more important remote, but that benefits anyway. But also understand your people. So if you've got people who are really kind of visual, they like the interaction, give them those kind of tools. Shared whiteboards, make that part of every meeting that there's a shared whiteboard. If they're linear righty people, then put that into your support infrastructure for them. If they're story to etc. It's like embrace who they are and pick a set of tooling that supports that, because they'll need that as they remote work. So again, some people go, oh, this is a great technology. It might be a great technology, but understand the type of folks you've got and how you support them. What are their challenges going to be in remote working and what they're going to be excited about, and wrap those into how you do the transformation.
That makes sense, because I've worked on a lot of remote teams, and what I've realized for me, because I'm such a visual person, is I like to see everyone, but I also need a Google Doc in front of me to write down what we just talked about, because it'll go, like, I'll get so excited in the conversation that I forget what are our next steps. So we would have this rolling, different meetings, our marketing team or different teams would have our rolling Google Doc where we would say, like, this is what we talked about, these are next steps. And then everyone can go into that later on and say, oh yeah, okay, this is what we agreed on. And it doesn't matter then at that point where you are. I think even if we were in the office, I don't think people even take as good. I think you actually take better notes when you're remote, because you have to make sure everyone's on the same page. I liked the point, I just want to highlight the point that you said about you have to deal with your culture no matter what, because I think a lot of people don't want to do remote work because they're kind of just in old school infrastructure of culture within like larger corporates, and they don't know how to fix it, and then remote work actually feels like it just points out the problems that they need to fix anyways. So it's almost like embracing all of that along with allowing people to have more flexible works, which is what you said on your company. You guys everyone's super committed. It's like a really nice work environment because people really care.
You create a high trust environment, right? And that's it. People are like, how do you build trust? How do you believe in good? If you trust people, you build trust. And actually, that's the way around it works. That's the psychology of it. So that remote work is like, I'm going to let you go do your thing, right? Okay, you know, it's an adult relationship now. I always have, and this is sadly a true story from a very long time ago, an organisation that I was working with, and they'd hired a new great sales team member, and it was all going quite well, and they were bringing in numbers, and came in one day, it's like, where are they gone? Well, I had to let them go. Why? Well, they were never at their desk. They were always out meeting customers. At which point, oh. and that genuinely happened. And it's an extreme example, but there is that thing of, well, what is it you want people to do? Because you're not paying them to sit at a desk. Right? Nobody's paying them to sit at a desk. That is not the business competitive advantage for the next century. Like even in education, we talk about this internally a bit now, that training people to sit at the desk for 8 hours doesn't create economic value. What creates economic value is people discovering knowledge, working together, creating new insights, leveraging their skills to create more than they could alone. That's the purpose of a business, is what can you do with a collective of people, creating the right environment for them. It's kind of obvious. So remote work really forces that. It's like we're just going to put aside the sit at the desk for 8 hours thing and refocus on how do we create a productive work environment, how do we create a productive culture.
But isn't it that goes back to people being stuck in like industry 3.0 where we were all at a factory on an assembly line, and it really did matter because the longer you were there, the more they got out of you.
Yeah. So if I can see you, I can manage you. Yeah. Which, if people are creating unit work output, is true. I would debate about whether it's that kind of Taylorism is a productive measurement mechanism. But when it comes to anything that's knowledge work, what you're looking at is what oftentimes people call discretionary effort. Right, you have a choice about whether you have the great idea or not, or maybe not. And maybe you have that great idea in the shower or whilst kind of going for a walk. That's the valuable thing, and you don't get that by sitting over somebody. It's like, be creative. No, I'm watching, be creative now. Yeah. That's not how it works. And again, when you explain that to people, it's kind of obvious, but it is like, what is our unit of work? What are we producing here? Okay, what is the environment to create that? The rest just makes logical sense. It's not that big a step. And yes, it requires new skills, but hey, the world's changing. Yeah. People's expectations of work, and that's a whole other thing around that kind of balance of what the social contract is for work as well.
Well, I think also as the world changes, and I don't want to plug millennials, but I do think when I graduated high school, the stock market crashed in the US, and my parents lost their job, and everyone lost their pensions, and we were like, yeah, we are not going to get stuck in the bubble of working 30 years, getting a mortgage. Like, we all saw how that didn't work anymore. So I think that generation is now slowly getting into middle management. I think things are changing in the way that we look at things, or I just think the world's getting more open. It's just so much easier. Maybe that's the way I want it to be. I don't know.
You look at the raw economics of it, certainly. I mean, traditionally you go back a few decades and people's big debts were they had a mortgage and they had finance on the car. And that's certainly shifting now. Car ownership falls off, home ownership, people are renting instead. And that creates a different environment where people do have more flexibility around changing job. And that means if you want a stable business, you have to create an environment where that becomes their stability and they want to be there because they're not there just because they have to pay those things. Their runway, the kind of free cash of being able to take off and head across the world and do something else is much bigger than it was in my generation when I headed into the workplace. And so you've got to work out what is it that people expect, because it's not just that you work, we give you money. There's a lot more to that transaction now.
And that could be like 3 more videos of like,
certainly could.
People want impact in their work. It's not just about money anymore, blah, 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 blah. But I think we'll put a pin in it on this one. Thank you so much, Benjamin Ellis. Tell us again what your company is.
So Benjamin Ellis, SocialOptic. So you can find me on Twitter and LinkedIn and those great places.
I'll put links into the video. Thank you for coming. We're going to do a remote work event tonight. And I'm just excited to have you to be in each other's networks and just to keep promoting people having healthier work life, all the things.
And that's the thing. There are other people doing this as well that you can talk to. You can hear their success stories and what their challenges are, and kind of getting involved in those networks. You'll find a huge deal of support in that. You're not alone in kind of trying to do this. There's a whole group of people doing it, and kind of what you're doing, the things you're bringing together. There are people you can go and talk who are doing the same thing as you in a similar environment and maybe a little bit further ahead in the journey, and you can learn.
Yeah, and I think that's what it's about, is the fact that there's so much support out there for whatever you want to do in the world. So just be more I always joke that I'm really shouty about things. Like, I just like, hey, this is what I'm doing, everyone. Do you want to come together? And everyone's like, someone the other day said, oh, I'm pulling a Brittnee and I'm posting everything online to bring everyone together. And I think that's what you should do. So I'm glad that I did that, or somehow we got connected, I guess, through, Bernie Mitchell, putting a plug for Bernie. Okay, this is Brittnee Vaughn from Remote Collective. I'm going to end it there. Hope you guys have a good day, and let us know if you liked the video. Drop some comments, like, subscribe, all the things, and we will see you next time. Bye, guys.